Hello, Robert. It is time again for the Underdog. Who is the underdog in the next game you're going to show to us?
Well, it's actually very interesting as at the time of our recording, there's this FIDE Grand Swiss tournament taking place in the Isle of Man. Some of the best players in the world competing for 2 qualification spots for the candidates. And I was expecting, I know all the players in this field. And then I was looking at the list, and there were just 1 or 2 names I had never heard of before. And one of them is Ramaza Zhalmakhanov, if I pronounce correctly. You know him, yeah, Arne? You know him, yeah.
I know, but only because of yesterday, because I looked at the table and he was quite up there, and I was like, who the heck is that? Yeah, so
exactly. And it is quite remarkable. He's just a few rating points higher than me, so I was curious. I started to investigate a little bit. I looked at his games. He is from Kazakhstan. He is 21 years old. And Kazakhstan is actually a very strong chess country. They don't have that many top players yet. But just a few weeks ago, there was also this game in the Qatar Masters where Magnus Carlsen lost to somebody rated 2,500.
Exactly.
And he was also from Kazakhstan. So there are some hidden treasures, and that's good for our show. And I would like to have a look at one of these games from Zhalmakanov, as he started fantastically with 2 out of 2, crushing some very strong grandmasters. And after that, he also drew with Alireza Firouzja with the black pieces. So he's definitely a guy for the future.
Jeez.
And I think his second round game was the most interesting one. He played against Grandmaster Amir Bassem from Egypt. Very experienced Grandmaster, and I would say just let's have a look together.
Yeah, I mean, Bassem, he was the very first ever from Egypt who reached over 2,700, right? And now he has like 2,680 or something. Like, what a good player, absolutely. Okay, so but Zhalmakanov was white. What did he choose?
Yeah, so well, the first 10 moves, it's a very standard opening theory in the Ruy Lopez. It's actually a system which Amin has been playing exclusively, basically against one e4. It's the starting position of the Ruy Lopez, and he goes for knight b8. It's the Breyer variation. So this was definitely some preparation by Zhalmakanov. So let's see. D4.
So quickly for our viewers, there's a little construction in the background. I just hear tiny noises. Nothing to worry about. Don't worry. Everything is fine.
That's good to hear. And I will try to over voice myself, so everything will be okay. Knight bd7. This is all very standard. And Zhalmakanov goes for the move c4. It's one of the many variations. The most common move is to develop the knight to d2, but with that move c4, the idea is to get the knight to c3 eventually. Black goes for the move c6, queen c2 over protecting the pawns on c4 and e4, all kind of standard theory still. Bishop b7, and white plays the move a3. It's a subtle move, but the idea is that you would like to get your knight to c3 without being bothered by a move like a b4 anytime soon. Black captured the pawn on d4, and that's quite nice for white. White gets a nice square for the knight, and the knight can later go to f5 to put some pressure on black's king side. But the idea of black is that now the e5 square becomes available for the knight as well. C takes b5, a takes b5, and white develops the bishop to f4. So you can see that white has a little bit more space, but black also has a nice flexible pawn structure. Pieces are reasonably well developed. And I think objectively the position is more or less balanced. If black would continue with a move like knight h5 to challenge the bishop, and later try to break free with a move like bishop g5, you can aim for some control over the f4 square, as the bishop and the knight are controlling that square. I think that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But playing against a lower rated opponent, it's very understandable that Amin also tries to create some imbalances in the structure. And he, instead of playing knight h5, he started here with the move b4. And I think b4 is this sort of double-edged move. Of course, the pawn cannot be taken because the rook on a1 is unprotected, but it gives white an outside passed pawn, which may become a useful asset later on.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea by black is that the knight cannot come to c3. So that's the reason why black went for this setup. But it's positionally speaking quite risky. But if you want to play for a win, you always have to take a bit of risk.
What I was also wondering, if I may ask, Zhalmakanov plays the Ruy Lopez. I wouldn't consider Ruy Lopez to be an opening which is like mostly drawn. But do you think that his initial goal was to maybe lure out a draw against Amir Bassem, or did he think like, maybe he will try to generate some problems, and this is the time for me to strike?
No, I think he was not out for a draw at all. This is an approach you may often use as being the underdog. But judging from what we get to see, I have absolutely no indications that he was trying to make an early draw. I mean, if you want to make an early draw, there are other forcing lines he may have opted for. So no, it's just that both the position is more or less equal, but it doesn't mean that it's a draw at all. It's both sides are trying to get a game and hope that the opponent makes a mistake later on.
Understood.
So black goes for knight h5. So basically this plan we have seen already. I've mentioned it. But here white decides to give up the bishop for the knight. So that's also very interesting. It's maybe something you would not have expected. No. But you do create an imbalance. Bishop for the knight. And now the knight is under attack on d4. So the knight comes in to f5. And so does black. Black comes with a knight to f4.
Symmetrical.
Yeah, so both knights are looking great, and the knight on f4 it's looking for the d3 square at some point probably. White goes for knight d2, getting the remaining piece into the game. Also, the rook the rooks are connected, so they can work together later. Mm-hmm. Black goes for g6, questioning the knight.
This is another thing which is quite interesting, because it is an annoying strong knight, and it's difficult to get the knight away from there, right? Except you play g6, and that
exactly. I mean, it's also because if you don't play the move, how are you going to solve the problem with the queen protecting the bishop? So you really want to get rid of that knight. Makes absolutely sense here. And the interesting decision, because I think if you're out for a draw or a more clear type of position, you would probably just capture the bishop and take it from there. There's not much wrong with it, except that black probably gets an easy game with the queen coming to g5, threatening some mate on g2. So here we see the idea behind black's play with a knight on f4. But in the game, white decided to keep knights on the board. Knight drops back to e3. Mm-hmm. Bishop goes to a6, so the bishop gets activated, and that's an interesting move. Looks because
strong.
You see that black is trying to gain control over the d3 square. Could be quite nice if a knight lands there, so it does attack the rook and potential pressure against f2. But white plays bishop c4. Nice consolidating move, controlling that square. And I think this is already an interesting moment, as probably black should just swap the bishops. And now the queen cannot take back, as that would hang the knight on d2. White got to take with the knight. Not sure which knight is best, but let's say knight d takes c4. And I think here black can come in with the bishop to c5. So to put some pressure, bishop can come to d4. Queen can come to g5. There's definitely some activity here for black. It's not bad at all. But in the game, Amin played bishop c5 right away. But that gives white the opportunity to come with a knight to f3. And that's a bit unpleasant, because now the knight also attacks the pawn on e5. And it also covers the d4 square. So the bishop cannot come there if it wants. It would be a great square for the bishop. Second thing is that now the knight is no longer on d2. White is actually probably threatening to take on a6, followed by queen takes c5.
So that
explains the next move, queen e7. protecting the bishop. And now the interesting part of the game starts. I mean, was just some introduction. Let's say it's very normal for these Ruy Lopez structures that it starts very calm, and then we are ready for some nice tactics. Now. So knight comes into g4, attacking the pawn twice on e5.
That's nice.
And here, interesting move by black, ignoring the threat, plays the move b3.
Wow. This pawn has traveled some bits.
It may not be clear what the exact idea is yet, but let me show you. If you take with the bishop the pawn, there's knight d3 with an attack everywhere. A lot of activity, and even here, things are far from clear, but black is trying to seize the initiative for just one pawn. Then, if you would take with the queen instead, there's rook b8. And black is going to regain the pawn now, because after the queen goes away, you take on c4, white recaptures, and the rook takes on b2 with a lot of activity once again.
Mm-hmm. Just h5 and the last...
And the last defender will be kicked
well,
away.
At least has to go to e3, but yeah.
Yeah, but no panic here. Zhalmakanov, very cool. Just play the move queen c1. Keeping the bishop protected, and saying that the pawn on b3, it will become a weakness later on, probably.
Okay.
So now black got to think about the pawn on e5. f6 is not allowed because of the pin.
Stupid chess rules.
Yeah, stupid chess rules. Yeah. What are we doing here, Arne? Bishop d6 played to protect the pawn, and now white is freeing its position by taking the bishop on a6, and the queen comes to c4, so activating the queen.
Ooh! Out of a sudden, this a4 pawn became a huge threat.
Yes, that's what you would think, and that's something black anticipates here. By keeping the rook on a6, the rook goes to a8 to keep an eye on this a pawn. It cannot come forward, but probably we would just focus on one side of the board, but that's not really needed, because there are other deficiencies in black's position as well. White goes for this move, rook ed1. The rook is no longer needed on the e file, goes to the open file to put pressure on this bishop, and it's not easy to make a plan here. Black played the move king g7, trying to get out of some pin. Maybe at some point there are ideas maybe with f5 or h5. I'm not sure what exactly is best. By the way, with the king on g8, there are also ideas with knight h6 check, followed by knight takes f7, when the queen has this double defensive duty of keeping both the bishop and pawn defended. So that explains the move king g7. But now white played very interesting move g3. And here...
That is crazy.
That's really crazy, because it looks as if the pawn is hanging.
Yeah.
The knight captured the pawn on h3. King goes to g2. Now the knight is under threat. The knight has to come back. So what has white accomplished here? That's my question for you and for the viewers. What had white in mind? Why did he sacrifice this pawn?
That's a really good question for you at home, by the way. I hope you are always also checking out the whole game, which is in the Chess-Based News article. The link is, of course, underneath the video. Put it in your database and study it thoroughly. That's my advice for you. So I think this is really fascinating. So probably, or perhaps my first thought is to open the H file and maybe give some power on there. But the other idea is, of course, that after taking on G5, we can take back on D6, I guess.
Let's have a look. That's a very important line. It's more concrete than going over with the rook to the H file. After knight takes knight, queen recaptures, rook takes the bishop, but then the queen can still capture on G4. So material will be okay for black.
Yeah,
this is sorry.
But now what happens after f3? Because the queen is a bit limited out of a sudden, right?
Probably you can do that, but I'm guessing the queen can come back to c8, trying to keep everything protected.
Yeah, and you cannot use the rook from a1 because it has to take care of a4. Okay, good.
Exactly, and also white's king has been a little bit weakened by the move f3.
True, that's true.
So, but we are looking in the right direction. Try to look at the forcing moves, and there are some very spectacular idea which was probably missed by Amin. And whenever you have an interesting idea, we had an interesting idea, also consider to reverse the move order.
I see. Okay, so what happens if we take on d6 first?
Exactly. Rook takes d6 was played in the game. It's a great move, but we have to calculate it. What do you think? What's going to happen now?
Well, if the queen takes back, we can take the knight on g5, and maybe this is actually, this is enough threats to either push on f7, but now also out of a sudden it's h7.
There, I mean, in general, two minor pieces for rook. It's quite nice. White will get very nice attacking chances. We can have a look at this later. Just black is not obliged to take back on d6. And how about the move knight takes f3 first?
Exactly. How about that?
There is a very nasty move here for white.
I cannot find it. How about you, my dear viewers? Have you found it? Have you seen it? I didn't. I couldn't. I don't want to stall too much.
Obviously, you cannot take with the king, right? Because then the
you
rook
just
is
have
still
a
hanging.
piece less. Yeah.
So that doesn't work. And okay, if you move the rook away, then the knight can be saved again, can probably even come to d4. So now the most beautiful move of the game, I would say. It was not, by the way, this was not played in the game, knight takes f3, but I'm pretty sure this was Zhalmakanov's idea. He wanted to go for the move queen c5 to protect the rook. Now the knight is hanging. You got to do something about that knight. If the knight goes to g5 back, it's not the only square, but it's a square where it can go to at least. What does white play here?
Knight takes e5?
No,
I don't. I
look for more.
Oh, of course. Okay, sorry. Took a little too long for that's a bit embarrassing. Of course, the rook takes on g6.
Rook takes g6. So that's a beautiful idea. It's a discover check. You're winning the queen. If you take the rook, queen will be captured. If you instead solve the check by going back to f8, there's this other deflection motive with rook g8. And after king takes, you take the queen on e7. But these moves, so let's review this line again. Rook takes the bishop, knight takes on f3, and now this silent Zwischenzug, if I pronounce correctly,
that was pretty good.
It's queen c5. This can easily be overlooked, and I think that's exactly the move which was missed by Amin.
Absolutely brutal. Yeah, I mean, how did he even see that, Zhalmakov? My goodness, Zhalmakanov. Sorry.
That's not the last tactic we will see by him.
Oh goodness!
I guess.
Okay.
So let's go back in the game after rook takes d6. Black realized he cannot take on f3, so he went for the move queen takes d6, and now we get this position with two knights for the rook, and black's position is really bad. But it's also nice to see how white converts its advantage. Rook went back to a7 to protect the pawn, and now white consolidated its position. Knight comes back, and we have a new target. It's the pawn on e5. Also, the pawn on b3 can be taken very soon. So if you protect the move, if you protect the pawn with the move f6, there is queen takes b3, and black is in big trouble. So black instead tried here to go for the endgame with the move queen e6. So it attacks the knight and the queen. White basically has to accept it. Weakens the structure for black. And the idea is also that the pawn on a4 is going to be hanging. But white goes for the move rook a3.
Oh.
So this little pawn will be taken eventually.
That's the real threat here at the moment.
Right. So rook takes a4, rook takes b3. And one nice little touch here is that rook takes e4 runs into rook b7.
Yes.
Check. And if the king goes to the back rank, then the knight will come into f6 with devastating threats. Probably the other knight can come as well. There are a lot of mating patterns with two knights, with the king being cut off on the 7th rank. So therefore, the pawn on e4 couldn't be taken. Rook covered the potential check on b7, but then the knight comes in, protects the pawn, hits the pawn on e6, rook e7. White captures on e5. King goes to f6. Two knights are hanging. But you can do many things here. You can play the move f4 and your knights are fine. But now there's some nice gallery play. Knight takes c6. So attacking the rook. Rook c7 played. And now still both knights are hanging. But look what White had found here. He protects one knight with the move f4. And of course, the big question is what happens if you take the rook, with the rook, the knight.
It's a checkmate threat. I can't believe it.
Look at this. Rook will come to b7 with the idea of delivering checkmate on f7. That is just a game over.
Come on. Wow.
So yeah, that's amazing. So no time to capture the piece. h6 was played. Look at this, Arne. Then e5 came. Check. The king has only two squares to go to. If it goes to g7, it's knight takes e6, winning the rook on c7.
Exactly.
And if you play the move king to f5, can you find the final move of the game?
Wow. Okay. So let us see for a second. Is there? It looks so crowded for the poor king.
Look at this king. Try to bring an additional piece into the attack.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm looking at the king. I mean, it's a checkmate threat, is it? But yeah, it is a checkmate threat. There's nothing you can do. Oh, goodness.
Excellent. King you can play the move king f3, right?
The rook cannot take on f4. It doesn't make any sense.
It's still protected if you do take the knight. It's, of course, g4 with checkmate. And if you play the move h5 to prevent White from playing the move g4, now we got to make another mating threat. Just try to give a check as quickly as possible. What is the best move here for White?
Oh, the check as quickly as possible. Well, there's only the knight who can give checks, so it's either d4 or e7.
Well, but don't give away your pieces.
Yeah, I see, exactly. So
the rooks are covering the squares.
So, yeah, exactly. We have to get this rook away. But how? How do we do this? It's checkmate with the knight on either... it's the rook to b7?
Ooh, no, but you can take it, yeah. Rook b7. You're not really deflecting the rook in this case because both the d4.
You're right. No.
Yeah. Too brilliant to be true. Let's take it back. But look at another option with your rook.
Well, then it's no, but oh no, Robert! Today is not my day.
It's not your day. Okay, I'll help you to get out of your suffering. Rook b8. It's the move.
Rook b8. Okay, yeah, that is very convincing.
And there's not much you can do against the check. And the funny thing is that White's king is absolutely safe. There are no checks by the black rooks.
That's the craziest part, exactly.
Yeah, so, in fact, one move earlier, after the move king f3, black resigned. And, that was
goodness
victory for I still need to get used to this new hidden treasure in the chess world. Ramaza Zhalmakhanov, it's the name. I will never forget it.
Rolls quite beautifully of the tongue after all.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, what a fascinating underdog game. 200 and almost 230 points difference. And let's see what we can expect from this young fellow in the future. Well, thank you, Robert. This was the Underdog for today. We will see each other soon enough. Have fun watching the Grand Swiss. And see you soon. Bye-bye.
All right.